Just let's be honest today. How many of you have heard of something called Endless OS? Okay. As far as I'm concerned, I keep an eye on a lot of distributions, but actually, I didn't hear about Endless OS until recently when I read an article written by my friend Jack Wallen for Linux.com. And then something interesting happened. My friend Michael Hall, who used to be a community manager at Canonical, joined Endless. It's a company which is based out of San Francisco, which develops this operating system called Endless OS. A few days ago, they came out with a new release of Endless OS, and I talked to Michael, and that's when I learned a lot about the company. So I was thinking about. I must admit that I never actually installed Endless on my system, so my impression was based on the article of Jack that I casually read. But when I talked to Michael, I realized that they're actually doing some really great work, and this is one area where I think Linux can have an impact. As I talked about in my previous video, that Linux does not have any chance. I mean, it can, but it does not have any chance to succeed in the desktop world and beat Microsoft Windows or Apple Mac OS in that market. But there are a lot of niche. There are a lot of other areas where Linux can really have a lasting impact, because there are a lot of markets that Microsoft or Apple is either not targeting, or they're not interested in, or they cannot kind of cater to those markets. So that's the kind of areas where Linux can improve things. So let's talk to Michael and try to understand the goal, the vision behind the company, and learn a little bit more about the operating system itself. Michael, can you tell us uh, what was the inspiration behind the company Endless, and how did it start, and what problems was it trying to solve?
The company was founded kind of with a social mission. Our founder, Matt Dalio, he spent some time in China when he was in college or just out of college, um, working with children's charities there. He founded a charity there. And so he's always kind of been a social entrepreneur. And looking at the market right now for PCs, he saw a need for PCs that are functional without internet. He saw, there are people in the world who don't have broadband internet, they don't have unlimited internet, they've got mobile phones with a paid data plan. They want to have a PC that they can work on, do actual production stuff instead of just consuming content. But without internet, a lot of standard PCs weren't really useful to them. So he had this idea of making a PC that would work offline or with very little internet, that was affordable and easy to use. And he actually started out, when he first formed the company, they started on an Android base, and they were doing kind of like the Ubuntu convergence thing, where they were trying to put up a desktop style interface from an Android device plugged into a TV. They did that for, I think, a couple of years, and it just wasn't working technically the way they wanted it to. So they ended up switching over to a Linux base, standard GNU Linux base. It's actually Debian right now. I think it might have been Ubuntu at one point, but it's currently a Debian with GNOME shell, customized shell that still looks kind of Android-like. It's got the app grid as your home screen. When they started doing that, they were looking at what content people were getting online and how much of that could you preload. So they looked at like typical Wikipedia consumption and found that, I think he said, like 80% of the most viewed Wikipedia articles would fit into like less than 10 gigs of space. So they've built up these tools and frameworks that will pull in stuff from the internet and compress it and pre-install it on the OS. So that right now we've got partners in different countries. Acer and Asus are the big ones. So they'll ship Endless OS, and it comes preloaded with a bunch of apps that have content from Wikipedia and other online sources that are already on there. So we've got an encyclopedia app that has all the Wikipedia articles in it that works completely offline.
So from what I understand, you are targeting kind of emerging economies, emerging market. I come from, I grew up in India, so I do understand the situation of internet there. But I want to know from you, what kind of users are you targeting with Endless OS?
The ones we're focusing on right now are where people have intermittent access to the internet. So either they've got a mobile phone they can tether on a paid plan, or they've got like a local web cafe, or they'll go to a McDonald's or somewhere that's got internet, and they'll do that once a week or once a month.
And just out of curiosity, how big is that market?
What we usually say is 3 billion. How accurate that is, I don't know, but the number of people who have mobile phones, like smartphones, but not PCs.
From what I understand, you are targeting a market, and the what makes it different is that internet is the big kind of bottleneck, big challenge there. So you cannot expect people downloading huge amount of kind of and the even in countries like US where you have access to high speed internet, you don't see people downloading Linux and installing on their systems. It can succeed only if the distribution comes pre-installed on hardware. So hardware is a very important component of this whole equation. So what kind of partnerships, what kind of deals do you have with hardware partners? Are there these official hardware partners, or you buy some hardware, install endless on it, and sell it in the market? Can you talk about the hardware partners?
We have Asus and Acer and HP, and we're working on getting Dell as hardware partners. So they're selling laptops with Endless OS pre-installed on them.
Where are you selling these devices? What kind of countries are you targeting?
They're on sale in Mexico, in Brazil, in Guatemala, and now in Thailand and Indonesia, and I think either currently or soon in India.
I understand that Endless is funded by venture capitalists. However, the unique market that you are targeting also creates kind of new opportunities and new kind of business models. Can you talk about that? Because you may be working with ISPs and other companies to somehow offer a proposition where they also see a value and where you also get some value.
We have investors in the company. Like I said, it's still a startup. It's still venture capital funded at the moment. We've got the OEM partners. We are working now with internet providers to try and get them, because some of them already offer like discounted data rates at certain times of the day. What we want to do is to be able to partner with them and say, we'll set the computer up so that it pulls update at the cheapest time of the day to save the user money. That will encourage people to use your service because it'll save them money in the long term. So for those subscribers, give us a little cut of that subscription fee. So we're going to partner with the mobile operators and the regular internet providers on that. I don't know when that's going to happen. Those are conversations that are just now starting, but that's part of the long-term goal, is to take advantage of cheap internet time and have that built into the OS itself.
Since you're targeting a market which is kind of different from what we are used to in the Linux world, where you get regular updates, I'm kind of obsessed with keeping my system updated. I run Arch Linux and I run OpenSUSE Tumbleweed on my Dell Precision 5720 all-in-one system, which is a great machine. And I run update once a day. Yes, you won't believe, but I run update once a day. And that also means I consume a lot of data because I'm updating a lot of packages on regular basis. But when I look at endless market, I'm looking at people who do not have access to either high speed internet, or they don't have access to continuous internet, which also means that you cannot literally run something like Arch Linux or Tumbleweed kind of system. So I'm guessing that the operating system or the way you deliver or update application on the system must have adopted a different approach than what we see in traditional Linux distributions. So can you tell us about the operating system that's powering Endless and what kind of update mechanism you have there?
So we took a Debian base, but we wanted to really lock down. We didn't want it to break or to be complicated to use. We wanted it to be like Android or iPhone or iPad, where things just always work. So we use Debian as a base, but we create OS tree images for the OS. So you've got this read-only system partition, essentially. It's like Ubuntu Core, or what Ubuntu Personal was going to be before that got canned. So we've got this read-only OS tree base that gets differential updates through OS tree images. So it's either, you either have the full update or you don't. It's not an in-between thing like with packages. And then on top of that, all of the apps are delivered through Flatpaks. No apt, no yum. It's all through Flatpaks. Right now we use our repository, which has got our apps and some third-party apps that we've packaged. We use the upstream GNOME app flat package repository for their apps. And soon, sometime in the next couple months, we're going to turn on FlatHub by default as soon as that's ready, so that any apps that go into FlatHub will be available on Endless also.
So the way I understood it is that these updates work in the same way that they work in Chrome OS. I mean, I'm a heavy Chrome OS user. My wife uses Chromebook as her primary laptop at home, and where you get there's two operating systems installed. Let's call them A and B, and at any given moment you're running either of the two operating systems. So whichever you're not running, it's in the background, and whenever you have any updates, they are installed on the other version. And when you reboot the system, it switches to the latest version, and then this version goes back and sits behind and waits for updates. So there is no intervention from user to update the distribution or the operating system. At the same time, you have kind of a fail-safe system, because if the update fails, or for some reason you fail to boot into the updated operating system, it falls back to the previous version, and so that you don't even realize that something went wrong. So it's something similar I see there, but there is a bit different, because they are using Debian, and of course Debian is not Chrome OS. So I talked to Robert McQueen, who's a developer at Endless, and he explained that they are using a tool called OS3, which was initially developed for GNOME project, but now it has become an independent project on its own, because Red Hat is using it in their project Atomic, which is Red Hat's distribution for cluster computing for containers and microservices, which also mean that it has a very secure and stable feature, because Red Hat is using it in the enterprise segment. So it's a bit different from CoreOS, but it seems to me that experience might be same, since I have just kind of installed Endless last night, and I've been playing with it. So I have not reached a stage where I got an update and I kind of updated the system. So I have not experienced the process of how it gets updates and what kind of notification a user sees. So let's talk to Michael and ask what kind of experience a user gets when there are any updates available for the system.
The user experience is the same. So it'll come up and it'll say, a new version of your OS is ready, reboot to switch to it. And when you reboot, you'll be in that one. And the previous image will be kept around so you can roll back to it if something goes wrong.
One thing that I really like about Endless is that they're using Flatpak instead of using the traditional .deb or Debian-based packages. And the reason was, as Michael explained, that initially it was based on Android, and they wanted a very simplified user experience on Android. The way you see, each application is kind of bundled, so you don't have to worry about all the dependencies and libraries, so you don't have to actually care about these users coming across dependency hell. Even these days, sometimes on OpenSUSE, because I kind of try to live on the edge, so I come across problems where there is a conflict between two libraries, and I have to choose whether I want to update the application or I want to stick to the older version. So they did not want any kind of such kind of experience, and they wanted, from what I understand based on my interaction with Robert, was that they wanted a similar, since the whole operating system is kind of a single entity, they wanted a similar kind of model for applications as well. So you have bundled sandboxed applications, but back in those days there were no such models. So Endless came out with their own custom bundle app system, which was inspired by One Laptop Per Child project. But it was a lot of work for them, because they were doing all the work themselves, and there was a barrier for developers to make their applications available for Endless, which also meant that Endless did not have access to a lot of applications out there. So when Flatpak came out, it was a perfect match for them. First of all, Flatpak was also using OS3, and it offers the same experience bundled sandboxed applications, and at the same time there is a possibility of major Linux distributions adopting Flatpak for their own project. In fact, a lot of major open source applications like LibreOffice are already available as Flatpak. So there's a kind of very secure future. It's stable. It's backed by kind of, because it's indirectly related to Red Hat and Fedora communities. So you can imagine that it has a very secure and safe future going forward. It has a very good developer backing for the project. So it makes a lot of sense to adopt Flatpak instead of any other solutions out there. Now, the only flip side of this coin is that Flatpak is relatively new, so you don't have that many applications available for Flatpak. So, Michael, how many applications are available for Endless right now?
There are currently around 300 applications available. So still far less than you would get from like an Ubuntu. But we're hoping that, as other distros adopt Flatpak and hopefully will congregate around FlatHub, that will start to grow. FlatHub's going to give the benefits that the Snap Store has for snaps for Flatpaks. So there will be one place where you can upload your stuff to, and all the distros will get it from there.
Endless just came out with a new release, and I have been playing with it for a few hours now. So, but can you tell me what are the major highlights of this release?
Yes, 3.2 just came out. The big thing is a GNOME update. So when they forked the shell originally, it was on 3.18 of GNOME, and that became technical debt. So up until just recently, we were still on 3.18. They just came out with 3.24, I think. The big thing for this release cycle was to get closer to where upstream is. So we didn't get to 3.24, but we're on 3.22. And the plan is to stay just 6 months behind the GNOME release from now on. So a lot of the patches that we had on the shell have either gone upstream or been refactored, so that we have less technical debt on that.
You worked on Ubuntu before, which is also based on GNOME, and there were some components removed from the GNOME stack, and Canonical did a lot of things in-house like Unity and other stuff to offer the whole Unity experience on it, whereas Endless also kind of doing the same kind of customization. But how different is it from the work that you were doing on Ubuntu? By you, I mean the Ubuntu community or Canonical. And at the same time, you don't want to build that debt, so that you have a whole stack of in-house built application that you have to manage and maintain yourself, and you kind of get further and further away from the upstream. Can you talk about that a bit?
Right. And, we've already got the patches. We've already got the design that is Endless OS. So we need to keep with that. But as much as possible, we want to get into upstream so that we don't have to carry that debt around. And we're not making that kind of major change. It's not like with Unity where we had to patch GDK to get the global menus or anything. So the patches are more on the surface than what Unity was doing.
One of the most interesting features of Endless is the offline access to online content such as Wikipedia. I have been using it for a while, and the whole user interface is amazing. When you don't search Wikipedia like you see kind of like you as if you're reading an ebook kind of thing, where you see, I was like looking at musicians and there was a list of Maroon 5, Shakira, and you just click on it and it opens a very nicely formatted page where you read about people. There are a lot of how-tos. There is a vast amount of information out there offline on Endless. So can you talk about the work that you have done around making this content available in this offline format?
We are soon going to roll out a public release of the tools that we've built to build these offline content apps like the encyclopedia, which really they take a set of links to content that's freely available, and it downloads it, it compresses it, it'll shrink image sizes if it needs to try and keep the size low, and it'll build a nice looking app. We've got these content tabs like the encyclopedia, we've got a personal health app, we've got history and geography. And these are all built around this set of frameworks that we have that will pull in content and put it together in a way that these apps can display. And we're going to open that up so that anybody can use it. If they know of some app source that they want to use, it'll be, like a wizard style, put in your sources, choose your layout, choose your background image, that kind of thing, so that people can easily spit out new apps around data that they know about. And we want to encourage people to use that for local stuff that we may not be aware of. So like in Indonesia, we're working right now to get some local news sites and blogs from prominent people there into these apps so that we can get the content available offline and people can read it when they don't have internet access.
That's really impressive to have a chunk of internet is stored locally on your system, so that you can make services and website available offline. I'm heavy user of Facebook. Can you make Facebook available offline? I know you can't, but can you talk about what kind of services and applications or websites that can be made available offline?
Facebook we can't really make available offline, but anything, if it like you've got a news site with an RSS feed, there's no reason we can't make that available offline. And if we've got cheap or free internet access in the middle of the night, there's no reason we can't update all of that content in the middle of the night, and then it's available to you all day long.
Now, you just joined Endless from Canonical. What's your role at Endless?
They want to grow a community around Endless like Ubuntu and other distros have, and they brought me on to do that. So I am a community manager again, but for a much different kind of company.
You come from a much bigger company, Canonical, to Endless, which is kind of relatively smaller company. It's a startup. Ubuntu and Canonical on one hand was very influential. I mean, it's a big company. They have a lot of influence in the market. They have a huge user base. They have huge presence in the market. So how different is the experience working at Endless as compared to Canonical?
It's much smaller to start with. It's about 1/10 the size of Canonical. So yeah, I do have proportionately more influence. The people here are largely from the open source ecosystem. So it's when I first joined Canonical, pretty much everybody was like that, it seemed. Everybody had one foot in Canonical, one foot in the open source project they were working on for Canonical. And over time, that kind of shifted. We brought in a lot of people who hadn't had experience in open source. It was easier when I started on the community team there to convince people to participate in those other communities. And that kind of progressively got harder and harder to sell. So coming here, I was going with what I was used to. I was like, okay, guys, we got to do this. And we're already doing it. So it was kind of refreshing that I don't have to make the sales pitch on why we should work with Upstream GNOME. It's already happening. Canonical was very US Europe centric in terms of staff. Endless is very US South America centric. So there's a bit of a cultural shift there too.
So it's interesting to see that Endless has a very strong open source culture. So what value are you bringing to the company?
I will be bringing organization and infrastructure. They've been run as a startup, and so a lot of things were just, grab something that works, get it to where it works, and then don't break it after that. And so there's a lot of stuff like what we use for bug tracking, what we use for documentation. A lot of it's very inaccessible to the community right now. So a lot of my efforts early on are going to be opening that up, replacing things with stuff that works better from a community perspective, and just putting more process in place to make sure that we are open and transparent with the community.
One big difference that I see between Endless and Ubuntu is that it's targeted at a market with slow or very bad internet connectivity, which also means that a majority of your users will not be able to become contributors because they are not as connected as you would expect, somebody from UK, Germany, or US, which also mean that you have a different kind of challenge when it comes to engaging those users, when it comes to turning those users into contributors. So what is the unique challenge you're facing there, and how you're trying to solve it?
It's going to be a little bit different because with Ubuntu, we were targeting the people who are going to advocate for us were the people who are going to use it also. But with Endless, it's a little bit different. The people who are going to be advocating might not necessarily be using Endless. They might be using a Debian or an Arch or an Ubuntu, but they don't want to install that on their friends or their family's computers or their school's computers. So our approach is to try and get them interested in using Endless as a tool to help others, not necessarily as something that's going to help them directly. We've already seen a lot of people who are passionate about it. They like what we're doing. We've started hearing stories about people sharing it. So I want to make sure that we are giving them the information they need, the access to data they need. We're working on printing like stickers and stuff that we can send to them so that they can pass it out. Just giving them the tools that they need to become advocates for Endless.
I recall a talk by Sarah Sharp once at, I think, Scale, where she was talking about enablement and kind of inspiring contributions and collaboration from regions, from countries where people do not have access to faster internet. Because one of the bottleneck is that since they don't have access to kind of faster internet, it becomes really hard for them to go out and contribute or even to file a bug report. In some cases, when you're filing a bug report, you have to like click through like 5 different pages, and you understand every page load means a lot of data, and that discourages those people to kind of get involved and encourage. So I think she was suggesting that we should try to simplify the process of bug reporting, to make sure that it's not a lot of clicks and page loads. At the same time, there can be a mechanism where people can work on bugs, not work on it, but kind of file it offline, and once they get connected, it gets uploaded so that they don't have to kind of lose the progress that they made while they were filing the bug report. So have you ever thought about such kind of process?
I don't think we've thought about bug reporting from that approach, but that's a good point. We currently have a tool that will just pull in a lot of system information and logs. And we tell people, when something goes wrong, run this tool. It's going to create one text file that you can send us. And that text file is most likely going to have whatever information we need to debug it. That's a command line tool right now. I know they're working on a GUI for it. So I'm going to pass along the idea that, make sure that they can do this offline and then automatically have it submit to us once they have a good internet connection, because that's a great idea.
So you got a new gnome based release, you got Flatpak, and it seems like Endless is in a very good position, is in a very good shape at the moment. But there is always room to improvement. There is always something new to do. So what is your focus going forward when it comes to Endless? What are you guys kind of going to focus on next when you look at Endless OS?
We haven't put a whole lot of development time into, we call it offline internet, but that's the focus going forward. Now that we've got 3.2 out, we've got a pretty solid base. We've built the infrastructure and tools around managing the OS tree updates and everything. So now the focus is on that offline internet experience and making that better. The first thing's going to come from update, getting diff package updates for Flatpak, being able to get those from USB. So we want people to be able to, go to a web cafe, plug in a USB stick, get the latest versions of their apps in the OS, take that home, plug it into any Endless computer, and they can apply the updates from there.
If I'm not wrong, Flatpak is not like binaries where you have to download like 700 MB of exe, DMG, or dev file of an application like LibreOffice, because you cannot those users cannot afford that much of data. So how do you conserve data by ensuring that it downloads only those libraries or only those packages that are not installed on the system? Can you just talk about the mechanism that you used to update, or how does Flatpak work?
No, I know Flatpak can do diff updates. So if you have internet connection and it can, you can see what do I have, what's there, you can get the diff. If it's asynchronous through a USB stick, yeah, you would download the whole thing onto there.
Okay, before we wrap it up, what's your message to the community? How can they help endless even if they are not going to use it themselves because it's targeting in different markets? What's your message?
I would say contributing to FlatHub in general, there's a lot of benefit to, not just because it gets you on Endless, but pretty soon that's going to get you on Fedora and Debian and whatever other distros choose to ship it by default. And that's just going to be a much easier way for people to get and install your Flatpak packages. It's got buy-in from GNOME already. We've got some buy-in from KDE. They've already said that they're going to support their Flatpak runtime on FlatHub. They're still not sure if they want to put their apps on there or if they want to keep their apps on their own repo. But the runtime will be there at least so that apps like Telegram that use it can go on there. So that's the big thing. If you have an app for Linux or you contribute to an app for Linux that doesn't have a Flatpak right now, that would be the best way to contribute because we need the apps to be relevant.
Thanks, Michael, for talking to us today about Endless OS and the company behind it. It's really kind of inspiring to see that there are people like Matt who have found this vision to help people out, and that's what I think where Linux can actually help uh, to solve some real problems that people are facing in the real world. I mean, there are so many Linux distributions that are trying to chase the same pipe dream of Windows market share, and I really doubt that they will succeed there. But these are some areas, as I talked about in my previous video, that Linux can find its own niche, and then it can help people there, and that's exactly what Endless is doing. So my request to everybody who is watching this video is that even if you're not going to use Endless, because it's not like kind of designed for people like us, I would suggest to go out and help in whatever way you can, especially by spreading the word around it. And if you're from one of these countries and you still have very good internet connectivity, you can still help other people to get started with Endless. If you are a Linux user, try to use Flatpak based applications. That way you will increase the market share of those applications, and you will help Endless indirectly. At the same time, you will also help Linux in general, because I feel, and I'm not alone, there are a lot of people who feel that Linux does need a new app distribution and app format so that we can kind of eliminate this fragmentation which is there in the Linux world. So by supporting Flatpak, you will help not only Endless but Linux in general on desktop. So please go and help out people. Thanks for watching. See you again tomorrow.